Hi everyone, thank you very much for joining me again, and I've got a slightly different video for you today. In this video I wanted to talk about black and white landscape photography. Now, black and white is something that I do very little of. In fact, that's actually a fairly major understatement. I almost never do black and white. If I look at my portfolio, the 30 images that I keep on the portfolio on my main website, there's actually only one black and white image on there, and it's this one. But even that one image out of 30 isn't representative, because if I go back over the body of work that I've produced over the last 7.5, 8 years, there's probably only 10 or a dozen black and white images in that entire several hundred images that I've produced. And it's not that I don't like black and white images. In fact, when I see other photographers' black and white shots, I'm often really impressed by them. I like black and white. I think it really has its place in the landscape photography world. It's just that when I shoot an image and when I edit an image, I tend to think in colour. And black and white somehow just doesn't feel right for me, and I don't know why that is. But I've decided to try a little bit of an experiment. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to go back and look at some images that I've taken over the last 5 or 6 months, and I'm going to select 5 images and then convert them to black and white and see how they look. So I thought what I would do, rather than just sort of showing you the colour version and the black and white version, I'm going to show you a short clip from the video when the image was actually shot. Then what I'm going to do is just explain a little bit about why I've chosen that image to form part of this experiment in black and white, what I'm hoping to achieve by the conversion that I'm doing, and then show you the black and white image. And I'd be very, very interested to find out what you think about my black and white versions of these colour images that I've already posted. So let's get started. So for my first image, I thought I'd take you back to March of this year, to a shoot I did on a rocky bit of coastline just north of Alicante city, and it was a really windy day with some quite big waves and a lot of spray, and I'd had to find a slightly secluded area to actually find a safe place to take some shots. So let's have a quick look at the video clip. So that was the shoot, that was the colour image. So what I'll do now is put the colour image back up on the screen. Here it is. And I'll tell you why I've chosen this one and what I hope to achieve with the black and white conversion. So I've chosen this one because although there's a bit of colour in there, there's a little bit of colour tint from the evening side lighting, because it was almost sunset, I don't think the image is actually about the colour. It's much more about the shapes and textures and patterns in the rocks. So I think this is a good candidate for black and white. And in the black and white conversion that I've done, I've actually tried to enhance that even more by boosting the contrast a bit and by adding selectively some clarity into the textures of the waves. So here's the black and white version. I hope you like it. So for my next one, opposite end of the day, a dawn shoot, again rocky bit of coastline, completely different conditions, very cloudy and overcast, and a short video clip here that I think highlights some of the potential risks of photography by the sea. Try not to laugh too much. The idea is basically to shoot some images just basically looking out along this channel, using this as just kind of a line out to the sky, and there's not going to be a lot else. Then try and capture the waves breaking. That'll make for a much more interesting image. Portrait orientation, vertical format, 16 to 35 lens at what are we at? About 19 millimeters. Oh. Okay, so that was the clip, that was the colour version of the image. I have to say, I got absolutely soaked in that. It took me quite a bit of time to make sure that I'd cleaned all of the salt water off of the camera gear. And I was drenched completely. But it still makes me chuckle when I go back and look at it. Anyway, let's put the colour version of the image back up. So I chose this one for similar reasons to the previous one. There's not a massive amount of colour in there, and the image is much more about the shapes and patterns and textures. So black and white conversion, very similar to the previous one, a matter of boosting the contrast a bit, making sure the highlights don't get too bright, and again using the brush tool to add a bit of selective clarity into the waves breaking, particularly in the foreground. So here it is. Okay, for the next image we're moving away from the coastline up into the mountains. And this was a shoot that I put the video out in June of this year, up on Quebec-Thondoloro mountain. It was an evening with quite a bit of cloud around, and I was hanging around until after the sun had dropped below the mountains off in the distance, and hoping to get an interesting shot. Let's have a quick look at the video. So now that the sun's gone down, I've gone back to kind of my original idea for a composition, with this grass in the foreground, the mountains in the background, and the clouds, which are actually looking quite nice up above. Yeah, so the 1 second one is just blowing out a little tiny bit in the corner. Might not matter actually. The half a second shot is a bit underexposed in the shadows, and the 2 second shot's actually picking out lots and lots of detail. So yeah, that will work as a exposure to merge quite easily. Okay, so that's the video, that's the shot. I'll put the colour image back up on the screen. Now I've chosen this one because this is one of those images that sometimes when I look at it I really like it, and other times I actually hate it. Something about the colour in this image doesn't look right. I don't know if it's the way I processed it, but I've had a play around since with different processing approaches to it and never quite got the colour to look right. So I think this is actually an ideal candidate to go black and white. It's got some quite dramatic light, some quite dramatic clouds in the sky, and in terms of the conversion I've done very little on this. Converted it to black and white, added a little bit of graduated filter in the sky just to darken the clouds up there a little bit, and I actually pulled the clarity overall on the scene back a little bit, just kind of softening it just a fraction. Here's the black and white one. Okay, so for the next image we're moving to July, back in the mountains again, actually back on Cabezón del Oro again. And this was a trip that I did where I'd actually planned a couple of compositions that I thought would work well with blue skies, because that's what we were getting. So let's have a quick look at the video.
It's not perfect, I can't quite get it the way I would like it, but what I've got is the ridge that's in shadow coming down from the top left hand side of the frame, and the trees there are just a little bit down from the top of the frame. So about 136 millimeters I think, f11 2-second timer, and that's the shot. That might work. I'm not entirely convinced, but it might work.
Okay, so that was the video, that was the image that I got, so I'll put the colour version up on the screen again now. Now the reason I've picked this one is because it's actually all about contrasts. There's some colour contrasts in this image with the kind of orangey yellow tones in the cliff face that's catching the sun and the blue sky, and there's quite a lot of luminosity or brightness contrasts with the three different sections of the image, and I'm interested to see how the image works if I take out the color contrasts and just leave the luminosity or brightness contrasts. So for this one, the image has just had a very straightforward black and white conversion, and it has just had the blue tones darkened slightly. So I've used that sort of adjustment slider to pull the blue tones back and make them a little bit darker. And here's the image. So onto the final image, and we're getting pretty close to up to date. This video came out in August, and it was a video that I published when I was actually getting really frustrated with the blue skies, and I was struggling with the motivation to go out and struggling to find images that I thought would work. Here's just a short bit of video.
Okay, so I've actually tightened the composition in quite a bit more. I've got the focal length now at about 134, 135 millimeters, and I've really just got the peak on one side and kind of a tree over on a hill over on the other side. Okay, so I think I'm just going to take the shot now. We've got some quite nice light on the mountain.
Okay, so that's the video clip, that's the image. Let me put the image back up on the screen again. Okay, so this one I've selected for a couple of reasons. First of all, it kind of jumped out at me again because I've got the contrasts between the blue sky and the kind of yellowy orange tones in that peak, but there's also the luminosity or brightness contrasts there as well. And I've also picked it because actually a few people have said they thought it would look really good as a black and white, so I thought, well, 2 reasons to do it. And in this one I've done basically the same as I did on the previous one, just a straightforward black and white conversion, and pulled the blue slider back in that tone module in the black and white conversion in Lightroom just to darken the sky a little bit. So here it is. So that's my 5 images experimented on as black and whites. I don't know, what do you think? Do you think the black and whites are better, worse, just the same? I don't know. I'd love to hear what you think about these 5 images. So any comments you'd like to leave on them in the comment section down below, and maybe I'll reveal the results in a later video. As always, likes and shares are really helpful in terms of getting this channel promoted, and as I said, comments based upon what you've seen or any other comments you'd like to leave are also very much appreciated. So that's it. I'll just say once again, thank you very much for watching, and until the next video, bye.